Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. On behalf of everyone here at SES, I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar. The webinar title is Navigating CBAM, the comprehensive update for EU importers and global exporters. I'm your host. My name is Tariq Belhassen. I'm based in Brussels, in Belgium. I'm the Director of Business Development and Strategy for Europe. Before starting the presentation and looking at the slides and following the slides, some practical information to avoid any unnecessary background. You will be on mute, but don't worry, you will have the possibility to express yourself and ask questions. So to do so, if you look at your webinar console on the right hand, on the upper side, you can type there your question or your questions, and just send them to, and just hit the button send, and we will receive them. We will try to answer as many of your questions. If not, we will also make sure that we will answer all the questions, although maybe some will be by email if we don't have time to answer to them all. This webinar is recorded, so you will receive later on a link to access to this webinar. So it is recorded. And to start our presentation and webinar, we'll start with two poll questions. And these questions is to know more about your role and your level of experience, to adjust eventually the explanations, so my colleague can, during this webinar, give you a better explanation. So please, if you can answer these two questions. This is the first one. Yeah, so the results, yes, so we have 41% that are others, but those who specified their title. So we have 22% of exporters and a balance with operators and importers. Thank you. The next poll, we have a second question very quickly, is how would you evaluate your CBAM knowledge? So now it's about the knowledge, to have an idea of your level of understanding and your knowledge about CBAM. Same, good balance. So we have 38% of beginners, intermediate, and we have some 9%, 10% almost of advanced, and some 90% are new to the topic. Thank you very much for answering these questions. They are very, very useful. Now I will move to the presentations. So today we have two of my colleagues participating and who will present. So we have Mohamed Abderrazak. He's the technical director and in Europe. He's based in Germany, in Europe, and he's part of the SCS Consulting Services. And my colleague Umang Patel is part of SCL Global Services. He's an LCL practitioner, and he knows he can be also useful to answer any of your technical questions during this webinar. So we prepared this agenda for this webinar. I will do a quick introduction to SES. Then we will go through the CBAM in terms of requirements. What are the reporting requirements then? It is important that we were very happy to bring you the latest developments related to CBAM. As you know, there is a lot of discussions for the moment, and that some decisions will be taken very soon. So we will cover this part, and finally we can explain to you how, with our services that we designed specifically to you, how we can match your needs. Next slide, please. So we start with a quick introduction about SCS Global Services. It is important to know that we are an international and a global company. We are leader in third-party certification. We have a consultancy that is presenting today this webinar. And it is important to know, and almost unique in certification, that we develop our own standards. It is also important to know that we are dedicated to sustainability. So our sector is really all our services and our activities are linked directly or indirectly to sustainability and to environmental issues and protection. We are issuing on an annual basis so many certificates across, again, the globe. We have 30,000 plus certificates that are issued by SCS. We are collaborating with different profile of clients. So we have manufacturers, we have the industry from various sectors, but not only. We work with governments and NGOs to establish some quality plans, requirements. We help them to develop regulations. So our activities are also with various profiles, and we are counting more than 50,000 companies and organizations we are collaborating with. We recently, exactly last year, celebrate 40 years of existence. So we are quite seasoned experts in sustainability domain with our 40 years of experience in sustainability domains. As I explained, we will see it in one slide. We have technical and business and consultants around the globe that I will show in a minute in the map. Next slide, please. So STS Global Services is organized in 4 different groups of activities. So we have the SCS Global Services that I described briefly, that is focusing on certification, the verification, and the auditing. So it can be a third party, it can be a second party services that we provide related to certification or verification. We have the SCS consultancy group that is separate. As you can imagine, there is a serious, very solid firewall between the certification activities and the SCS consultancy branch. So we have very strong expert in consultancy. And we have the third group that is SCS standards. I briefly mentioned that we write standards that are our own standards to support our activities of certification, verification, and auditing. And recently, we have a new addition to our activities. This is the Global Heat Reduction Initiative. It's a very innovative thinking on how to mitigate the negative impact on the environmental and the climate, not looking only at the CO2, but also at other climate super pollutants. Next slide, please. Now to focus on SCS consulting services, providing this webinar today, and that is going to propose a comprehensive update on the CBAM. The consulting services are organized in 4 pole of activities. So there is the climate solutions, where we look at, let's say, the classical product carbon footprint. We look at the decarbonization strategy that is also very valid here in the CBAM. We have the regulatory compliance, so we have all the EUDR, the CBAM, CSRD, and we are also showing a strong expertise in the double materiality assessments, for example, in this group. We have the sustainability reporting, so all the CSRD or the SDGs related requirements that we can also help to build your reporting according to this. But not only, you have the CDP and the GRI. And finally, the management systems. So we can help and support companies for their food safety. For example, it can be a sustainability audit preparation. It can be an ESG management system that you are putting in place, where we can, as SCS consulting services, bring this technical support and give you a clarity on how to proceed. Next slide, please. This is my promised slide about the geography, just to let you know that we are global. We are headquartered in the US, in the West Coast. We have very strong presence also in Mexico, in Brazil, in Argentina. If we move to Europe, we have now a strong presence in Europe, a legal presence in the Netherlands, but we have technical expertise and auditors around all Europe. And not only the countries that are mentioned here, it's impossible to put them all here. Africa also, we are present in Africa. We have our main office in Africa in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan. And we are also present in other countries like Ghana, like South Africa. Now, if we move to Asia, we are well represented, and we are very active in China, but not only in Southeast Asia as well. In Indonesia, for example, we are very strong there. We have also a strong representation and activities in India. This is more or less an idea of how global and how regional and how close to the businesses we are dealing with around the globe. I think next slide, please. I have now two questions that two polls.
We have finished this one, Tariq, right?
These are, yes, indeed. So can you
move?
Yes,
this one is, yes.
Okay, so this is done. Okay. Okay, so now I will let our expert, technical expert, Mohamed Abdelrazak, to cover the presentation. Please go ahead, Mohamed. Thank you.
Thanks, Tariq. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for making the time for our presentation today. The start of the CBAM is basically with the EU ETS, the EU Emissions Trading System. Certain industries within Europe are obliged to get permission to emit CO2. They cannot just emit it. They pay for part of it. They can get it through auctions. They can get it through free allowances, but still they have to pay for it. And they are limited with something called a cap and trade system. A cap is the maximum amount allowed from all the sectors under ETS to be emitted within a certain year. And this cap is decreasing over time. And in a way or another, of course, the price of that they have to pay per CO2 ton equivalent goes up over time. The ETS has a focus on the installation. This is the EU lingo, let's say. Installation means a production facility. Any production facility that has a certain code to be under EU ETS will have to report how much have they emitted. They have to get verified by an accredited verifier from the EU. And then they have to pay for the amount of CO2 they emitted, or they can get some free allowances. And then came a couple of years ago, the EU Fit for 55, which is, I mean, the general climate plan that the EU has is that they will become climate neutral by 2050. And in between now and 2050, they said, well, in 2030, we would like to get at least 55% greenhouse gases reduction compared to the levels of 1999. These levels are checked for each sector, so each sector has their own goals. And out of this Fit for 55 policies came a few legislations, and one of those legislations is the CBAM, the one that we have ahead of us today. Some sectors under the European trading system, they get basically free allowances for 100% of the top 10 performers. So if the 10 top performers, they have per ton of product this amount of emissions, they will get that amount. If they are below that level, they will pay. If they are above that level, they will have a surplus that they can use. They can bank for other years, or they can trade. They can get money out of it. Then for certain sectors, the EU decided that let's reduce the amount that we are giving them based on the 10% performers. And instead of giving them 100%, let's give them 90 or 97.5, and then we go for 95 and so on. But if we did that, then there will be carbon leakage, because if they have to pay for these industries like aluminium or iron and steel, they have to pay for it in Europe, this production can go somewhere else. And hence came the CBAM. The CBAM will go exactly the same way or the opposite way of the ETS. The reduction in the free allowances on the ETS will be compensated by how much is being paid for under the CBAM or the carbon border adjustment mechanism. The carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM, basically it mirrors the EU carbon pricing mechanism, but for imports. It's not installation based like the ETS. It's rather a product based. It is based on the actual carbon content of imported goods. The carbon here means emissions. It focuses on certain carbon intensive sectors like iron and steel and aluminium, but it will increase. It aligns with the WTO, because whatever you pay outside you have to pay also inside the EU. The ETS free allowances will go down and the CBAM will phase in. It also takes into account the carbon price that is being paid in third countries. If it's in China, for example, and then the Chinese government or oblige the production facilities to pay for the product carbon price, this will be discounted in the EU. And the main goal is to prevent carbon leakage and at the same time encourage other countries to have their own carbon system and to have decarbonization in the supply chain. I think all of you know the sectors. We have the cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizer, electricity, and out of the chemical industry we have hydrogen. These sectors are going to expand, so it will be others. ETS has ETS and has ETS2. It has maritime. It has the aviation. It's also for the refineries. A lot of chemical, glass, ceramic will be probably added either this year, I mean, at least on the list, and definitely by 2030, most of the ETS will be already under the CBAM. The timeline of the CBAM, I am sure all of you know it. It started in October 2023, and until the end of this year, this is called the transitional phase. After the transitional or during the transitional phase, producers or the declarants, the people who have to report to the EU, they can report on the default values until July last year. Starting from August last year until the end of this year, they have to report on the actual values. Actual here means it's just not a value that they get it from the EU. It's a value that is based on the input and output in the production facility abroad. January from this year, they started already working on the permanent CBAM registry. For instance, operators who are running these production facilities or installations abroad, they can have now access into this CBAM registry. But of course, the importers in Europe are able to upload their declarations or reports, CBAM reports, to the CBAM registry. Starting from January next year, that will be the beginning of the definitive period. The definitive period means they have to pay, there has to be verification, different scheme. And starting from 2027, then the declarants will have to submit their first declaration, the annual declaration. At the moment, they submit quarter declarations until the end of this year. But there is a proposal to shift the submission to October 2027 of the first CBAM declaration and surrender the CBAM certificates. One CBAM certificate is 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. Transitional versus definitive. During the transitional period, which will end this year, the reporting is quarterly. In the definitive period, starting from next year, that will be annually. No CBAM certificates are required today, so nobody has to. The importers, they don't have to pay. In the definitive periods, they have to pay based on the phase out of the free allowances of ETS. So in the first year, it will be 2.5%, then 5%, 10%, and so on. The verification in this period is optional. It will, in the definitive period, it will be mandatory, and it will have to be done each year. And the verification here, according to the current rules, is done. It should be done for the installations abroad and also for the importers who are declaring CBAM goods in Europe. Do you need authorization to import CBAM goods in the transitional period this year? No, you don't. Starting from next year, yes. Anybody who is importing the CBAM goods, they have to have an authorization. So they have to apply to the national competent authorities and get this authorization. Penalties during the transitional period, it's between 10 to 50 euros per CO2 equivalent, ton CO2 equivalent. In the definitive period, it's 100 euros per ton CO2 equivalent, plus they have to pay for any underreported values or volumes of CO2. In the transitional period, there is, they didn't impose any issues yet. For instance, for not submitting the actual values from last year, but we are talking about tax. So they might start doing that very soon. The main actors in the CBAM are either they are inside the European Union or outside the European Union. So if we talk inside the European Union, of course, we have the European Commission, we have the competent authorities in each of the European countries, and we have the European customs authorities. We have also the importers, entities that are importing something into Europe, and these could be, or they can delegate also the declaration to indirect representatives, and these would be called declarants. So if the importer is making the declarations, they would just call them during the transitional period reporting declarants. Starting from next year, when they have to get authorization, they will be called authorized declarants. Outside of the EU, we have the operators. It's just the EU terminology. I mean, it is what it is. Operators means that these are entities or companies or people, natural people, who are running installations or production facilities. What is missing here in the whole regulation is the exporters, because sometimes the exporters, they are not producing anything, and they are the main contact to the importers or the declarants in Europe. Hence, in our services, we are trying to say, how does the things go from the installation to the exporter, and what are the obligations of each? But let's keep it in perspective. When I say obligations, there is the legal obligation, and this is exclusively on the declarant. The person, the entity that makes the declaration has to do everything. But in practice, installations and operators and exporters will have to play a role, like in the verification, for example. The key requirements for the EU importers, they have to provide accurate information. And we are dealing here with tax authorities. The EU is trying to say that this is not a tax, because imposing a tariff needs a kind of unanimous approval by all the EU countries, where a regulation like the CBAM doesn't require the same strict requirement. But still, these are the tax authorities. I think in Europe, probably killers and murderers will get sympathy from the authorities, but people who are playing with tax, they don't. This is probably crime number one. So they have to provide accurate information. They have to provide the CBAM declaration or reports. At the moment, they are called reports. Next year, they will be declarations. Transitional period quarterly, starting from next year annually. And they have to buy CBAM certificates to surrender them, to give them back to the competent authority. It tells them, okay, I imported that amount that has this amount of CO2 embedded in it. And I am in 2026, so it's 2.5%. So this is the amount that I will have to pay. The CBAM certificates are not like ETS certificates. You can only buy them from the competent authorities. You cannot buy them from auction or from the previous years. They are valid only for 2 years. ETS are valid indefinitely, as long as they were issued after 2013. You cannot keep them. I mean, you cannot give them to other companies. The entity that bought them is the entity that has to use them. These are the rules as of today, as of published. That can change, of course, in the future. The key requirements for the operators, the entities or people running the production facilities, and again, the production facilities are called installations in the regulation. They should, of course, here we said they have to, because they don't have to legally, but in reality, if they didn't, they cannot export to Europe. They have to provide data on the operator, the owner, or the management, on the installation, production facility. That includes, of course, the GHG emissions based on the EU methodology. They also have to have a monitoring, reporting, and verification system, and they have to get verified by an accredited body from the EU. Starting from January this year, they are able to register and upload data to the CBAM portal, which is great. But there are some, of course, issues happening here and there in this registration. Embedded emissions. The embedded emissions are calculated. Basically, you have a production facility and an installation. You have direct emissions happening inside that specific facility. From heating, from processing, smelting, whatever the process is, these are direct emissions. You also have indirect emissions, and this mainly from electricity. And then you have precursor emissions. Precursors means the production facility is using a CBAM good that itself a CBAM good into the as an input. For instance, you use the unroughed aluminium to produce further steps into the installation facility. These are called precursors. So CBAM goods used as an input for your production facility or installation, this is called a precursor. And the outcome of that installation would be called complex good because it has 2 levels or 2 tiers at least of CBAM goods. And out of the whole thing will come the CBAM embedded emissions. It's not exactly the same as the other methodologies. The EU has their own very specific way of doing it. Let's have an example. We have an operator. Again, operator is the entity or person who is running an installation or production facility. They export to Europe. So we have here an operator and an exporter. They have 3 installations. They have 3 production facilities that are separate from each other. They can export the CBAM goods that will go through our beloved customs people here to the EU importers. But also that EU importer needs the reports. They need how much GHG emissions were emitted or embedded in these goods that I'm importing. And hence they will need 1 report per installation. The report here at the moment, there is something from the European Union, is the kind of communication template that you can do it. You can also do it in using cloud tools. You can, and starting from January, you are able to do the same task using a portal, the CBAM portal itself. This is the simplest way. An operator, exporter, that they have their own installations, they export the goods, they have the data, they collect it and send it to the importer. The period of the GHG is, in this case, is a calendar year. It can change a little bit if the country has their own ETS system or there is a way. During the transitional period, the minimum is 3 months. However, the one that is required, it is the 1 calendar year. And then the EU importer will be able to have the CBAM report, transitional or declaration during the definitive periods. Okay. Have another example. A trader exports goods to Europe. The trader is, in this case, an exporter. They don't have their own installations. They are basically getting the goods, the CBAM goods from installations, and they are exporting them to Europe. But they will be the interface between the importer and these installations. So probably, in most of the cases, they will collect the data from each of the installations and then send 2 reports to the importer. And as you can see here, we have raw material as an input. Raw material is not a CBAM good, so it doesn't have any embedded GHG emissions. So what is coming out of this one is called simple goods or simple CBAM goods. Have here another example, it's slightly more complicated, where we have an operator that exports complex goods to the EU. So we have an operator has 1 installation or 3 or 5, doesn't matter. They are exporting goods to the EU. And they are getting from another installation. So what they are getting from this other installation is a precursor. And this other installation is getting another precursor from another installation that gets it from raw material. So here we have 3 installations. Which one of those 3 has to submit the CBAM data, let's say in this case, communication report or communication template, the data, the CBAM, the GHG, and the actual data about the installation. There is a rule that is mentioned today in the regulation saying that the importer have to get basically simple goods, they have to have it 100% actual values. But for the complex good, they can go down to 80%, at least 80%. So if we say that in installation 3 and 2, they already cover more than 80% of the embedded GHG emissions, then the actual calculations or actual GHG will be done only for those 2 installations, and then the use of default values will be for the tier 2. So this is tier 1, and this is basically tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 will be default GHG emissions, And then here we have only 2 reports will be sent to the importer to be able to submit their CBAM report or declaration. Have the importers, or were the importers able to do that? As I mentioned, starting from Q3 last year, the submission of actual values is mandatory, it's not optional. So before that, most of the people were submitting default values. This is the number of CBAM reports submitted to the EU. In Q3 last year, there's actually more than 50% of the importers, they were not able to get the actual values and they submitted default values. That can come with problems because the report is going to be marked as incomplete. And I am sure that many of them also did that for, or I hope not, but that they did it for the last report that was submitted last month. But that comes with risks. Having an incomplete can have consequences, especially that things are not moving along. The competent authorities might contact these operators and ask them, or ask these declarants, reporting declarants, and ask them, what have you guys been doing? Show us the status. And that can lead to penalties, for example, or can make issues in getting the CBAM authorized declaration status, which is necessary for the importing from next year. Let's say you get a sense of the actual versus default values of unroughed aluminium. If you are using something like carbon footprint, which in this case would be cradle to gate, you get 4.29 CO2 equivalent per ton, while the value during the transitional period is 10.49. That value is going to change for the definitive period starting from next year. The EU this year is going to issue region-specific values. So if something coming from India will have a value, something coming from China has another value, and so on. And these values can be quite significant. In this case, it's more than double. Okay, so we get what are the updates that are happening so far this year. The process to apply for authorized CBAM declarant should start soon. The operators can register in the CBAM registry. They can upload their emissions. They can share it with the importers if they have the importer registration number. The quarterly transitional reports, they are still in effect, and they have to be used, submitted using the, or done using the standard EU methodology, using the actual values, not the default values. There are preparations for 2026, when the importers must start to buy CBAM certificates. The European Commission will review the CBAM performance and consider the scope expansion. And the rules for verification and the updated default values per country, as I said, will be also published. And then we get a bomb in between, which is the draft proposal from the European Commission to amend the main CBAM regulation. The CBAM regulation is like the bigger legislation, and under it, whenever the Commission wants to change something, they have an implementing regulation. They also have other things, implementing act and so. And you have also unofficial documents like the frequently asked questions, the guidance and templates. There is a proposal from the Commission to change the main CBAM regulation. So what are the changes? The first change is small importers, they should not be obliged to submit CBAM declarations. So any importer that has less than 50 tons of CBAM imports per year should be exempted from the CBAM compliance. A proposal is not yet a done deal. They want to have, they suggest a streamlined CBAM authorization process. At the moment, it's more complicated. They also created a new entity called the CBAM representative. I am an authorized CBAM declarant, but I don't want to go through the hustle. I can appoint a CBAM representative. And of course, they suggest a legislation, another implementing regulation to define what are the requirements for a CBAM representative. There's no change in the definitive period and the transitional period in terms of time, but they said, well, maybe for the first year, or let's make the submission by October 31st. And instead of May 31st of 2027. This is for the first reporting and submission of the certificates, CBAM certificates for 2026. They would like to, or they are going to, not going to, sorry, they propose to have a default carbon price per country that will be published by the European, that should be published by the European Commission, to avoid the hassle of not knowing what is coming out of a certain country. For example, if they have a complicated system with not only one number, but rather more complicated. Importers can claim the carbon prices paid in the country other than the one that they imported the CBAM goods from. Imagine you're importing from Indonesia, but the goods are coming from China. If something was paid in China, then that should be also able, the importers would be able to claim that in their declarations. No, according to the proposal, no CBAM certificates will be bought in 2026. The original proposal, or the current legislation is declarants can buy it weekly based on the average ETS price. But they want to change that to make it the purchase starting only from 2027. It's a risk because if the price goes higher, it will be higher in 2027. So they said, or they suggested, an average ETS CO2 price for the whole 2026. They emphasize that the verification is only for actual values. So if there is an importer using the default values, they don't need verification. But that, of course, in our mind will contradict with the need for using actual values starting from July last year. In this current proposal of legislation, they are proposing to have no limits on the use of default values. So actual values, you can use them, but default values could be used as long as you want. That will be country specific and will be updated regularly by the European Commission. They also suggested that some installations could be excluded if they are not under ETS system. One example of simplification is that the non-calcined kaolinic clays will be excluded from the CBAM because they said the emissions are too low. And they are giving strong oversight by the Commission and the national competent authorities. Of course, some of them are good news for some people, bad news for others. But is this a done deal? We go back to reality to see we have a current legislation that the competent authorities, the European Commission, and everybody else is going to work on. And we have certain steps to change the regulation. A regulation in the European legislation is the highest level of law. To change it, the European Commission has to propose something. They have to go through stakeholder engagement. They have to have public consultation, which is right now. The European Parliament will read it, make changes, vote, and on their own version. And then they will send it to the European Council, which is also going to do the same. If they disagree, which they will go for the second reading with a trialogue. The trialogue means that the European Parliament will discuss with the European Council, with the European Commission as a facilitator, to reach an outcome out of that, to get a final adoption, publication, and entry force. I can give you an example. Recently, they changed the European deforestation regulations, also a regulation. They only wanted to change the date. This is extensive here. This is the one that we have in CBAM. But just to change the date, everybody agrees that we have to change the date. It took 3 months. So it's not a straightforward process. It might happen by the end of this year. It might happen next year. It might happen in 6 months. We have no idea. And here comes really a lot of uncertainty. We at SES are trying to offer our services to help with this uncertainty as of now. How can you navigate this complex world, let's say, legislations, calculations, experts, the different countries, and so on. So we divide our services to operators on installations, production facilities. We have exporters who are in between, and we have importers and declarants. So our team provides a GHG emission calculations and review. And these reviews are at the details level, depends on what you want. So if you have already the installation or the data available, and you would like to see by an expert that it was done properly, or you want somebody to collect it for you, from China, from India, from Brazil. You have seen the map that Tarek has shown. We also have our own tool that is called the SES CBAM eCompass Suite to put all this information into it. We do have capacity building and training for all levels, from the C-level to the procurement team, to the installations, to the practitioners, whoever is interested. We can support on the CBAM registration, reporting, and verification support. If you want to report, at the moment you have to report on the actual values, but in the future that might change. But nobody can wait, unfortunately. So if you are having problems with these, we would be glad to support you. If you want to go more into details, into this monitoring, reporting and verification for an installation, if it's for an internal control system or a carbon accounting system for the importer, or even for the exporter, if they are interested in that, we have experts in all these areas all over the world. If you would like to develop a CBAM definitive period roadmap or action plan, even with the current uncertainties and proposals that might go through, that might not go through, there will be a lot of fights, of course, around that part, we would be there to help you. We can also check your suppliers, like if you are an exporter or an importer, what are the risks and opportunities that you have with those suppliers. We offer our CBAM commodity checker, where you are either write the CN code or you upload a file with 1,000 CN codes. These CN codes are the custom codes, to check which ones of your commodities is under the CBAM and which one is not. You will get the results immediately. This is complimentary. We will publish this one probably by next week. And if you need it before that, please contact us. There will be an email at the end of this webinar. Please use it, contact us, and we'll be able to help you. We have our tool, the CBAM tool, the eCompass Suite, where it makes it easy to calculate the values, but also to collect them. It has an automatic error checking. You don't have to worry about a comma or about a different system in a different country. If somebody, for example, is using not metric tons, they are using something else, then they will be able to use it within this tool. They can share the results with the importers and even with the declarants. It has a robust data security and, of course, a secured login. Where in this just sketch where you have a production facility with everything that is inside, production processes, the emissions, the heat imports and exports, facility data, reference data, everything, you will have it within the tool. And if you're a company here can be an exporter, but it can be also an operator that owns many production facilities. They will be able to have all their data in one place. And if this company would like to share the data with an exporter and then later with an importer, they will be able to do so, either in the Excel sheet. If they would like to go the one step ahead for the importer, they would need an XML CBAM reports. XML is a format that is similar to Excel, but it's easier to read by the computers. I will hand it back to my colleague, Tarek, who will show you an example of how putting all these services together can support your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. To give you to illustrate what Mohammed was referring now, related to the services we can provide, we picked two examples that are, let's say, classical for the CBAM context. In the CBAM context, so we have a production facility where how we can support. So this is a classical, let's say, pathway to reach the CBAM pre-verification. So as a first step, imagine that we are in Q1 of this year. So the most important is indeed to educate, let's say, so we can train on CBAM requirements and how the GHG methodology is because it's sometimes a bit complicated for those who are not familiar. So the GHG calculation and the methodology behind it. So we can do this training, and then as a step 2, we can help by doing SES can do the CBAM GHG calculation. And Mohamed mentioned the monitoring, reporting, and verification. So our colleagues can certainly support you to develop a robust monitoring, reporting, and verification. There is a step 4 that can be about decarbonization potential. So this is to boost competitiveness. So to decarbonize is certainly to increase your competitiveness. You know about it, and also to help you to detect and to define some decarbonization opportunities. And this will take us to the last step, where there is a pre-verification of the CBAM that can be done also with our team. The second example, next slide, please, is an exporter linked to multiple installations, and this here also is a challenge. So we need to make sure that we can support by as a step 1 to train not only the suppliers, but of course the exporter needs to be trained as well. This is also same topic, the CBAM tool, GHG calculation, the requirements, and we had feedback that the suppliers, more than 50% of the suppliers, are claiming that they are not capable and they cannot collect the right data. It's not, they are not used to do that. So we can support you to support your suppliers to collect the right data in the right format and that are checked, and there is a traceability of this data. So all this can be also be an opportunity for you to get some support from us. There is the CBAM GHG calculation per facility, because here the exporter will be connected again to multiple facilities, so we can do that. And then there is the GHG pre-verification, and this will be done by, of course, qualified auditors. And as a last step is to be ready for reporting, and to have the reporting to be to take you to the compliance to the CBAM. So these are 2 examples. We have other examples, but we don't have time for an importer. But we can, if someone is interested, we can explain to you how we can support you in your CBAM projects. Thank you. Now we are going to move to the poll. How we can help you with to comply with CBAM. That would be interesting to know. How what are the points that you think are very important for you, and how we can support you in the CBAM context.
Yes, and this is something that SES has been doing for 30 years. LCA in general, and of course CBAM, we were involved since the very beginning.
Yeah, so we have a lot of programs and services linked to the GHG emission calculation, obviously. So yeah, so thank you for answering this quick poll, and I can move to the questions. So we had very good questions. I will start with the first one. I hope we'll have enough time at least to cover some of them. Excuse me. So could you please disclose the methods on how to calculate or estimate the default values of carbon emitted by installations which produce the electricity imported into the EU?
Well, in this one, you can use the default values. You don't have to use the actual values for electricity. If there is a special method that you are using, you don't want to use the electricity mix, you are able to do it on the at the level of installation, following the EU methodology, which is in the implementing act or the regulating act.
Okay, thank you. Next question
but
is.
You don't have to use the actual values for electricity.
Thank you, Mohamed. Next question is, are there any voluntary schemes that will be or are recognized by the European Commission to certify the GHG intensity of the CBAM goods? Is there clarity as to the chain of custody methods allowed with the information related to CBAM?
Yes, I can tell you the second part. Surprisingly, they didn't mention anything about the supply chain, as if the commodities come out of the factory to the importer. They do in some cases, of course. If you have cement, that's possible. It comes out of the production facility directly to the harbor. But in most of the cases, you have something in between. You need the chain of custody. You need to make sure that things are going well. This is not mentioned at all into the CBAM, but it's a risk that you, as an actor in the CBAM, need to put in consideration, and we would be able to help you to work with it. On the first part, any certification scheme that is recognized under the ETS, the emissions trading system, the EU emissions trading system will be able to conduct an accredited verification. Our sister company, SAS Global Services, is in the process, so they will be getting this one and they will provide it. Later this year, there will be another regulatory act or legislation that shows exactly what are the details for this verification. But as of now, it is possible for any ETS accredited verification body.
Thank you. Next question is it mandatory that operators report emissions directly in CBAM registry, or can it be still done by importers based on operators' data provided outside of register?
As of now, yes, but when it comes to the definitive period, the permanent registry, a CBAM registry, I think this is going to change. It will, because the operators at the moment, they can do it in the way that they want. They fill in the information and send it to the importer, or they send it through the exporter. Later, they have to get a kind of permission to access the registry, and they will have to do it through the CBAM registry. That might change by the end of the year, but what we know now, no, you will have to do it, unfortunately.
I have one question about ISCC, related to ISCC. Do you have view on the role which the ISCC carbon footprints certification system may play regarding CBAM?
I don't know how is the ICC doing it at the moment. I have a lot of respect for ICC. That is a system that is dear to me, and I know that they are doing their job very well. But when we are talking about CBAM, it has to be exactly on the CBAM. For instance, input material transportation has to be included in any carbon footprint, right? But transportation is not included in the CBAM. Where precursors might not be included in the carbon footprint, but it is included in the CBAM. So I don't know exactly how the two would match. You can check with ICC, or I can check for you later to give you more details on that.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about North Ireland. What is the status of North Ireland? They were not treated as imports during transitional period, but what about during definitive period?
Well, as far as I know, they will, but this might change. It's not clear if the link of ETS is included or not. In this proposed legislation, they say, well, any ETS that is recognized by the EU or equivalent will be accepted. Do they accept the British ETS? I don't know. Will they do it or not? No idea. But in all cases, if you are paying taxes in the UK, if it went through, if you are paying taxes in the UK, you don't have to pay it again in the EU.
Okay, thank you. Have you heard when legislation will be passed regarding appointment of authorized CBAM declarant?
This one is already published. The process is published. They were supposed to start in January, already accepting applications for the authorized declarant, but for some reason they are delayed. I don't know if this new proposal is going to delay this further, or they will start on it soon. And if they did, just follow our newsletter. We will let you know.
Thank you. One more question here. If we are an exporter to EU and our operator, tier 2, 3, are small company, burden of the regulation is heavy for them between crosses. Shall we use default value or exact value?
As of today, I would tell you to go for this 80%. Are you covering 80% of your emissions in the actual, to be actual or not? If you need help to get this one, will be able to support you, but just take this 80% as a general. It's not a rule for operators. It's a rule for the declarants, for complex good, for all complex good, for the whole quarter. But it gives you how the whole situation is going. If that is not possible, you might be talking to your importers in Europe. There is a way to go around that one if the effort is too high, or if how can you say, the expenses are too high. However, that said, still these are tax guys. They don't joke.
Okay. I have one about the electricity power. If the electricity power is going to be imported into the EU in 2026, how can we measure the actual values of GHG emissions per megawatt to buy the CBAM certificates, taking into account that the electricity originated from different types of facilities, particularly from renewable solar, wind, and partially from generation facilities using natural gas or coal? Sorry, it's a long.
Yeah, this one we basically answered it. You don't have to have the actual values. You can have default values, and these default values are going to get better per country. But if you want to have the actual values, you will have to follow the EU methodology in the legislation. We can help you with that, of course, if you are interested. But as of now, you don't have to now or in the definitive period to use the actual value for the electricity imports. You can use the default.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, one more. We import from our subsidiaries in non-EU countries. Is there a way to us to use the same credentials to the CBAM portal to report the emissions from non-EU branches? Or do we need to register all these other installations as a separate access in the CBAM portal for non-EU installations?
Well, if it is an installation that is submitting the results, it has to. They have to get a permission, because this is something legal. If the installation is not yours, if the subsidiary belongs to you, your company would be able to say, we are the owner of this company, and we would like to see these data. You will be able to do that, or even submit it if you want. Nobody is telling you no. But if it's not belonging to you, the how can you say, these operators or these installations abroad, they have to register on their own. They have to send a letter from the managing director or from the operator head to say, well, I am this person and I would like to register for the CBAM, because they want a person to contact in the future. Will that be exactly the same login that you use for your CBAM declarations as an importer? No, these are two different entities. You cannot mix them.
Thank you, Mohammed. If you have any questions, you will have my contact details. Please do not hesitate to contact me, and I can share your questions with the team, with the SES Global Consultancy and SES Consultancy team. So I would like to thank you all for listening to us and for your very good questions. And I hope that this webinar was valuable for you. This presentation will be recorded, so you will receive the link, and we will ask you to take a moment to tell us how we did. We will have a little survey that will pop up in the screen at the end of this presentation. So thank you again.
5 is the best. 5 is the best.
5 is the best. Okay. So
1
yes.
is the worst. So that's
okay. So it will be only 5. So thank you very much again, and thank you, Mohammed, for all this very important information. Not only useful but important, knowing the context today of the CBAM. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tarek. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
And goodbye.
And
yeah,
we're
and
looking
stay
forward
safe.
to hearing from you.
Thank you.